able to so I think I'm able to record this. So great. Now we could continue. So
Okay.
like I was saying, today we're going to talk about data cleaning, future engineering, and statistical analysis. So like I said earlier on, when you were in school, I don't know if you have heard of garbage in, garbage out, meaning that the computer itself, whatsoever you feed into it is what is going to give you out as an output. So it is your 100% responsibility to make sure you clean up the data before you proceed with analysis. Now, the reason is because there are certain errors that you could get whenever you do not take care of this. And error itself is information that is lost during, for example, acquisition of the data. And it can never be recovered, e.g., whenever there is a crash due to maybe power outage in the server, error comes up. And then there is also the artifact. They say the artifacts are systematic problems that arise from the data cleaning process. This problem can be corrected, but we must first discover them. So it also goes hand in hand with some of the things that we used to that I used to say, that you don't just um, you have to understand your data. If you remember very well, I used to talk about you must try to understand your data. You cannot analyze what you do not understand. So it is mandatory for you to understand your data before you start doing your analysis. Okay, so try to have an understanding of your data. That way you can be able to analyze it. So there is also the data compatibility issues that could arise when you merge your data set. Wow, the data compatibility could arise as a result of the measurement unit. Measurement unit, you could have some issues with it. Sorry, some of you can mute. Some of you can mute, and then you can unmute when you want to ask questions or something. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the data compatibility issues can arise when you are merging data set, and it could be as a result of the difference in the matrices, and also it will come as a result of the variable types that you are considering. It could also be as a result of different data that you are looking at. For example, imagine when you are looking at currencies, you could have some level of compatibility if you're looking at a dollar to naira or naira to dollar or something. So you must make sure that the data are compatible whenever you are working with. Another thing that arises frequently that you are going to be seeing when we start the practical part of this class is the issue relating to um, data imputation, missing data. You're going to be seeing issues relating to data. Sorry, can you mute? Francis, can you mute? Good, thank you. So you're likely going to be seeing issues relating to data imputation. So the data imputation arises as a result of missing values. So you discover that we are going to be dealing with data set that are not complete. Okay, we're going to be dealing with data set that are not complete, and that could give rises to us trying to impute the data. So sometimes when the
sorry,
missing
but
data,
Mr. Francis, Mr. Francis, please mute yourself.
And she be disturbed. You know, she say then call my name, she make her mute. Okay, no here now. Okay, no here. No, they tell me to mute, so I don't mute now.
thank you.
You sleep. I want to sleep.
Um,
I can sleep.
no, I think he's still on
I
mute.
can sleep. Later, when you wake up, I'll change your pampers. Huh?
Okay, don't worry. I think I actually could mute him, so I've done that from my end. It's okay, Mr. Francis, no problem. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So we could go on
Thank you,
now.
sir.
So
Yes, sir. Thank you.
the process of dealing with missing values. So, like I said, the missing values you will see them by the time we start the practical part of this class, and it arises as a result of. You could imagine when you are doing an experiment that required you to use a mouse. It is not all the mouse that you start the experiment on. For example, you want to see the tumors, how to develop therapies for tumors that that occurs in human being, but you need to experiment them with mouse. In order for you to do that effectively, you have to first of all have the control group and the treatment group. Now, there is high chances that not all the treatment group will make it to the end of the experiment. So if we imagine if you are following up every 6 months and you need to do that for a period of 2 years, you may be shocked to discover that not all the mouses will get to the end of the 2 years. Some of them may die in the process of follow up. So that could give rise to missing values. There are also times when you're dealing with surveys, when you go to the field, you give out questionnaires. Not every respondent that you give them that answered all the questions. You could also have missing. In fact, those days when I used to analyze with SPSS, I came to realize students sometimes they create artificial questions. So they manufacture data on their own. So one of the way we used to know that the person did not go to the field is whenever there are no missing values. You will see somebody issuing out questionnaire to, let's say, 200 people, and all of them return back without missing. No, something must be wrong. Someone sat in his room and filled all the questionnaire. There is high chances about that. So you always,
It's not
you
going
know,
to be possible.
yeah. So you would expect this sort of missing when you are dealing with population-based survey data from people. So there could be so many reasons why, even in the real world, it's not every time thing events occurs. So you could record some sort of missing. So missing values are like an integral part of the of the system. So one of the way we deal with missing data when they are very small, we usually drop the samples that have missing. For example, if they are less than 10% of the population, we usually drop them of the sample. If they are very small, less than, let's say, 1% or maybe 10%, we drop them. And then there is the heuristic based, where you use some sort of reasonable gaze based on the knowledge you have of the domain area to be able to take care of the missing values. And there are situations where you impute using the mean values. And also there are situations where you use the median. There are also situations where you use the mode. There are also situations where you just put a random value. And then there is the k nearest there is a nearest neighbor approach, where you fill in the missing value by looking at the information around that particular value that is missing. So with that prior information, you can be able to use it to fill in those intervals. Then there is the interpolation. And interpolation is not about like projection. You interpolate by looking at, so it still uses the sort of knowledge of sort of like a proof in mathematics, where we used to say proof by induction. So you prove if x1 uh, plus x2 plus x3 is equal to, let's say, 3, and then x1, x2, x3, x4, x5 is equal to 6, then it means that for me to prove, I will now use induction to say, okay, it means x1 x plus x2 plus x3 down to xn is going to give me, let's say, n plus 1 plus. So from that, I could now extend it. So some sort of proof by induction. So interpolation uses such kind of method to design, you see, like a linear regression to predict the value of the missing. So you just try to, interpolate and see what's happening. So another thing again that you usually encounter in the process of when you are dealing with real data is outlier detection. You're going to be confronted with so many outliers. Sometimes there is always this black sheep that is not always conforming to the pattern in the data set. And they could be very interesting. You can imagine when you are doing things like fraud detection analysis, most of the things that we do there is outlier detection, because most of the time, for example, when we start doing the practical part of this class, we're going to look at things like fraud detection, like when you have to look at transaction in ATMs. So how you could be able to spot that this ATM transaction is likely going to be fraudulent is maybe the anomalies that you notice in the system. So the anomalies are usually very this thing, and that's how banks used to know that someone's account has been hacked. For example, over time, your transaction in the bank would make the bank to see like a pattern, and then someday they just notice there's this sort of withdrawals that is happening in lump sum, and then it's happening simultaneously. They'll be like, no, something is wrong. So the algorithm will quickly, put a ban on the account, and then the person will not be able to withdraw further. So that's how such kind of fraud detection algorithm are built, into the system to be able to stop. When immediately detect an outlier, it shut down the account. That's why when you try to log in into those accounts with your PIN, like more than 3 times, you see that it blocks you, and then you have to go to the bank and then you complain. The reason is because these are attempts that are anomalies with what the bank have previously recognized about the kind of transaction you do. So there is the miscellaneous, such as lower casting, removing of non-alphanumeric numbers, repairing and all that. So there are situations where you need to clean up, especially in natural language processing. You need to remove some things in order for you to be able to identify the action words like verbs, like nouns, and then you'll be able to develop some sort of lemmas of it, and some sort of future count matrix that you could be able to use for the prediction. So such things you have to clean them. For example, I was trying to work on something yesterday on the Python, and it was a sort of, I was trying to look at a way. It was just, I was just playing around. Okay, I thought of doing that because it was some sort of an idea. I wanted to develop an app that is going to fetch uh, articles from PubMed, and also from Nature. Then what I was looking out for, I wanted the article to check for repurposed drugs for diseases, and also looked at the symptoms and treatment and also the drug target. So when I wrote the code, it searched for me and brought out, and I converted it into data frame. So for example, you could see Alzheimer disease, the treatment strategies for Alzheimer. You will see drug repurposing for cancer therapy, novel drug delivery system for inflammatory, several other drugs like it came up. So I needed to identify keywords like disease, illness, symptoms, drug target, repurpose, treatment, management, and all that. So I have to further filter down and say I want it to identify articles that have this specific uh, keywords. So it will return to me articles that have these specific keywords. And then I filter down again to ask it to remove special characters for me. Okay, I say remove special characters like lowercase. So these are some of the things we're talking about when we talk about miscellaneous here. You remove those articles, those words that are not going to be useful for you before you eventually say, okay, I want to now develop a model that I want. So another thing again, after you do all this cleaning, the next thing is future engineering. Now, the future engineering comes into play because you cannot use the whole of the futures to develop predictive model. And the reason is because even in real world, you could imagine I want to farm. I needed to put in so I needed to first of all look out for land. I need to look out for labor cost. I need to talk about the humidity of the place, of the soil type. I need to look out the season where I should be able to start the farming. I need to put several things into consideration before I venture into that farming project. But at the end of the day, I would like to ask myself, what are the most pressing issues that I cannot be able to, if I don't consider them, this farming project will not be successful. One likely is going to be the capital. The second is going to be the labor cost. The third is going to be maybe the soil. So these are like indispensable. Then the next thing now is now to begin to look at, okay, now then how do I now begin to look at the other futures? I now say, okay, why not I collapse these futures to become one? So that process at which you collapse the future in building new futures, or you remove the futures that are redundant to the system that are likely not going to contribute to any sort of contribution to the model you want to develop, is called future engineering. So the future engineering is the process of using the domain knowledge to create futures or input variables that help machine learning algorithm perform better. So if you do it correctly, it could help you to increase the predictive power of your model. But when you don't do it right, it decreases the predictive power. So you can see you have to have the domain knowledge. So like I used to say, I told you earlier on in our previous classes that whenever you have the data set, do not just jump into analyzing the data. Try to understand the data, look at the research hypothesis, look at the objective of the aim and objective of that particular project, and then talk with domain expert. For example, I do not jump into analyzing medical data set, you know, for the fun of it. I have to discuss with people that have the potential knowledge in that area. I have to meet with maybe doctors and tell them, okay, what is the problem? What is really the concern? And then how do I help? So you have to know the problem and you have to work with people that have the knowledge if you don't have the knowledge. And that's why you also have to consult literature. So the problem I have with the system in Nigeria and the current state of the art sort of knowledge we have in the university, at 400 level, you are now saying, okay, now you are going to do research, or probably at master's and even PhD. You are now saying, they say, okay, now you're going to do a project. And then you go to maybe some schools, you pick up a project, or you go to the library, you pick up a project, and you'll see a lot of copy and pasting. The students are not wholly immersed into that spirit of what they should. The project is not just to pass the exam, it's to teach you that there is a knowledge gap. And the 4 years you have used in the classroom, how can you be able to condense it in addressing that knowledge? And that's what pains me a lot because the practical side of that knowledge is missing in our system in Africa. So we can be immersed in the theoretical knowledge. We could be exposed to some sort of theorems, and then we know a lot of theorems. Like I remember as a statistician, I know a lot of probability, I know a lot of marginal distributions, and how these things comes into be. I know a lot about regression and how to fit this line. But I've not been exposed to where can I deploy them. How do I go to a hospital and observe a queuing system and optimize it for them in order for them to save costs and at the same time, reduce the waiting time of the patient. So when we were doing project those days, you were doing it because you just want to pass the exam, and then but it's not supposed to be so. You're supposed to do these things by really solving a problem that is a problem to the system, something you could be able to address. And that is what I want you to have at the back of your mind as you continue in this journey. Know that the knowledge you are getting here, I'm not teaching you because I want you to go out there and continue to. No, I want you to put them into use. I want you to apply them into your business. I want you to apply them into your research areas of interest. I want to change what makes you you to begin to think from a different lens. Okay, so that's one of the reasons of this class. So just like the future engineering is all about building the futures correctly. If you do it correctly, it improves the predictive part of the model. Okay, so coming up with futures is difficult, it's time consuming, it requires expert knowledge. Applied machine learning is basically future engineering. And that's true because most times, even when we perform the machine learning, we look at which of the features are contributing most to the prediction of that particular event or that particular thing that we want to look out for. For example, if you are trying to look out at diabetes, you want to develop model that is going to predict if a patient is going to develop diabetes. So the neat thing is, by the time you do that model, you need to now look out what are the things that are making spikes of diabetes in this set of population of people. Maybe it could be their BMI, maybe it could be their healthy habits, maybe it could be even the family history. So you now begin to investigate these features. And then by the time you looked at these features, you could now say, okay, there are things that I put in this model that are not important. So why don't I show them away and build with the features I have? Now, one of it for someone that is in the lab is the fact that when you have so many features, you cannot be able to validate them clinically. So I would rather the lab scientists would rather want to work with few biomarkers that they could validate that could save cost. So it means that the future engineering is quite important. And whenever you're doing machine learning project, always think about how do you develop your model or your system with the minimal features. Okay. Now there are different data types that we talk about in our previous class. We talk about the categorical variables, we talk about the discrete, and even I think I mentioned a brief about the ordinal variables. They all forms into the categorical variables. And then we talk about the continuous variable. Now, the categorical variables, if you remember vividly last week, we said that the categorical variable are those variables that you cannot quantify them. So they are qualitative in nature because you can't quantify them. For example, now it's either is a man or a woman or it's a boy or a girl. You can't just quantify them. It's a whole thing. You count them. If they're going to be rain tomorrow or there won't be rain, it's an event. Does this person going to develop diabetes or not? So these are things you quantify. Is it a yes or a no? So response. So it has to do with qualitative sort of analysis. But continuous, on the other hand, there are features they are numerical in nature and they are used to quantify things. For example, your weight, your height. You can be that's why you see people saying this one is 5.67 feet. This one is 6.1 feet. Although I think the highest was 6 feet. I'll say I don't think we have more than that. But you always see maybe a decimal following that. Then you see somebody saying I'm 54.6 kilogram or something. So you could see this is a continuous thing. It's not something you just had it on one fixed scale. Okay, then even we talk about other things like stocks, things that happen in real time. They don't just, like inflation. They are always like a continuous thing. They fall or they rise. So it's a continuous spectrum. So raw measures, data that haven't been transformed. So most of the time, the continuous variables will be in raw forms. So you need to round them sometimes, to reduce noise. So you round them to nearest integers or decimal places. And then you don't just take them directly and feed them into the model. Maybe I could show you an example of what I'm trying to say. Um, if you could see here clearly, you could see I had some variables here. You can see some are big, some are small. Like the VEGF is small. The Kim here is big. You can even see this clustering here that moves up to 7,000 plots. You can see this one up to 14,000. It's big. But rather, you could see there is this variable that is very small. This one is just 4.5, 5.2, 5.2. Then, so in this kind of situation, you don't just take that variable directly and begin to model. There is going to be conflict because the skills they are not measured on the same scale. So what do you need to do? You need to scale. You need to perform some sort of scaling, and then what that scaling does is that it's going to look out for the central tendencies, like the mean, and then it will also look at the mean max, the highest in the data and the minimum the minimal in the data. It's going to take them and perform some sort of transformation. So that transformation would help to normalize the data so they will all be on the same scale. So it's not like your variables are always like, just take always think of your variable like an athlete that are running to win a race. Also think of them like the footballers that are in a pitch that are playing to score a goal. Now, in football, all of them have to wear the same clothes, isn't it? They have to. Is it clothes or jersey? We call it jersey, I think. They have to wear the same jersey. Like Arsenal. When you talk about Arsenals, you always see the red, the sort of a red and white color or something. It's like, then when you talk about Chelsea, we say, oh, Chelsea is the blues. When you talk about Liverpool, which is my favorite club, by the way, you see them, they also have their color, and even have slogans. So that is to like identify them, set them apart like a brand. So the same way in the data, the scaling give them like an equal ground to be able to compete to make that prediction. So that's the reason for you to scale. Another thing before you begin to model is to make sure you fill in the missing values using, like I said, the median, the mode, and all that. Then another thing again that we do to continuous variable is we beam them. When we say beaming, it's like you take them on a particular range. You can say, okay, from 0 to 20, I will beam them to be 1. From anything from 21 to, let's say, 40 or 39.9, I will take them to be 2. So you beam them. It means you put them into some sort of a beam and say this range. So the beaming is all about transforming numeric features into categorical variables. Okay, and you can assign these values to them. You can say people that score between 1 to 10, they should be scored A. People that scored, just like in the university, if you score A, it means you likely scored from 70 to 100. And if you score B, we said, okay, the person scored probably from 69. So I think B stop around, if I'm not mistaken, 59 there. Is it? No, I think 60 thereabout should be B. And then C should be around 59, maybe to, I, I, I think 45 thereabout, right? And I can't remember how these skills are taken now. So, but you know you do that. So when somebody score an E, I think it's in some schools it's 40 thereabout, if I'm not mistaken. Then F is maybe below 40 thereabout. Okay. So are we still together?
Yes.
Okay. 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 Great.
Yes,
So
yes.
okay.
My
Okay.
place is
Nice.
noisy. That's why I mute it.
Okay, it's fine because like I wouldn't want to be talking to myself all alone.
Yes,
All right,
yes. We
great.
are together. We are very together.
Okay, okay, it's great. So we also talk about potential interaction between the futures. So another thing is you're likely going to see futures that are negative. You're going to see futures that, and then some of these futures you'll be able to combine them. You know, some of them you could add them up to become one future. Some of them you could be able to multiply. So whatsoever you just and again, you know, the futures are sort of like a matrix. It's not even sort of, it's a matrix. And if it's a matrix, you should know that matrix are bounded by different laws like addition, multiplication, subtraction. You know, it happens in matrix a lot. So that's also from that angle. Then another thing again is that we perform some sort of statistical test. Sometimes we check for power. Sometimes we take a statistical association, looking out for the p-values, and sometimes we visualize the distribution of that data. When it is continuous variable, I will be teaching you guys that when we start diving as we progress. When you have continuous variable, what sort of plot are you supposed to make? Because you don't just make a plot because of the fact you want to make a plot. No, if it's a discrete variable, you're likely going to be doing things like bar charts. If it's a continuous variable, you're likely going to be looking out for things like histogram. That's when you want to look at the distribution. But when you also want to look out for potential things like outliers, and also you want to probably understand the spread of the data, you looked out for things like box plot. You know, so statistics and when it is things like time series data, you know, you also looked at like the line plot. So different plots comes into play whenever you have different data that you're considering. So you have to put that in mind. And then you remember you have to take care of the missing values. Very important before you start modeling. Another thing again that you will likely going to see in the real world is what we call the cost of dimensionality. The cost of dimensionality usually occurs when we have several variables. And then so we have more futures, lesser sample size. And there are situations where we can have the other way around, but we wouldn't call that dimensionality issue. But it's also a problem because that situation it becomes very difficult for you to apply some sort of machine learning algorithm, especially algorithms that have to iterate across each rows. It's quite difficult when you have millions of these rows. So the cost of dimensionality is most of the time when you have a lots of futures, lots of futures. So whenever you have such kind of a thing, you begin to think of how do you now transform these variables such that you could now transform them into components. Now the components are merely linear combination of these variables. So what that does is that it takes this data set and project them into some sort of data cloud. And then in that data cloud, what you're looking out for is where the futures are mostly spread. Where they are spread, you now be able to say, okay, so by using principal component analysis, you can now say, okay, I could see that the spread are mostly in the first 10 dimension. So you now say, okay, the other dimension do not capture much variability. So because of that, I could do away with them and just focus on the 10 dimension. But the problem with that is that you lose the futures in their original state. So you can no longer be able to know much about the influence of the futures. Rather, what you're going to be looking at is the where these futures are concentrated. It's very possible that you can be able to identify futures that are in the first 10 dimension. But how these futures are able to push the prediction sometimes may be lost. So that are some of the issues related with PCA. So you don't just do PCA, but you could actually gain a lot of knowledge whenever you're doing PCA. Why? Because it really gives you where the concentration or what is really happening. For example, now when you talk about Nigeria, you don't just talk about all the states in Nigeria. Mostly when you talk about Nigeria, you are likely going to talk about Lagos, you are likely going to talk about Abuja, and then you are likely going to talk about Kano and maybe Kaduna in the north. And then in the south, you are likely going to have Lagos or Port Harcourt. And that doesn't mean that Nigeria does not have other states. But these other states, people say, oh, nothing is happening there. So the same way it is when you are doing dimensionality reduction, when you project the data, you will likely focus on where things are happening. So that is where the variability lies. So that's why sometimes you say, okay, I will just restrict it to 10 dimensions. And then you work with those 10 dimensions. Then another thing again that you see in dimensionality reduction is clustering. Usually PCA always carries his elder brother clustering with him. So PCA is always like a beautiful lady with a handbag. Yeah. So it's just like so you always see clustering following PCA. And the reason is because now you are now interested in finding what sort of pattern does this spread looks like. How does they look like? Are there likely some group of variables that are clustering differently from other variables? Now, what that does is that it also helps you to focus your attention more on those group and begin to see. So things like clustering, factor analysis, principal component analysis, PCA, they does these things. Okay, so these are the sort of things they do, and these are the kind of things you should look out for. So another thing is encoding. Most of the time, we use to not just transform this data set, but we encode them because the machine itself, the computer, have to work with what we call machine language, and the machine language is in zeros and one. Okay, so what that does is that most of the discrete data that you give to the computer, for example, male or female, the computer will encode it where it will assign 0 to male and 1 to female. So it sort of encodes them before it processes them using machine learning algorithms. So there are different ways we encode. There is a way you could encode it if it's an ordinal value. Like I told you last week, I said ordinal variables are those variables that are occurring in an orderly manner. For example, a general is not the same with a private, despite the fact that they are army. So when you are encoding that, you are transforming that, you are converting that discrete, you would make sure you maintain that order. You don't just go about and assign, no, you are likely going to say a private will be 0, a sergeant is 1, and a warrant officer or something is 2, and then a lieutenant is maybe 4, a captain is 5, a major general is 6, and a general is 7, a lieutenant general is 8. Things, stuff like that. You follow that ranking because it's very important in this kind of profession. So when you are doing a research, for example, to look at welfare of army or soldiers in barrack, definitely you collect information from privates, from captains, from colonels, from so you don't just go and feed them, you rank these things and then you be able to go into the analysis. So there is also the one hot encoding. What the one hot encoding does is that it transforms them, creating a new variable for them. So if I have gender and gender was in a variable, having just male and female. The one hot encoding will now transform them by creating new column, which will be male, and then the next one will be female. And then whenever there is male, it put one. Whenever there is female, zero. Then on the female future column, it will fill it the same thing. Whenever there is female, they put one. Wherever there is male, they put zero. Now, the thing is, if I am looking out for a particular category that is influencing, for example, a prediction, the one hot encoding is a good thing. It makes sense for me to condense the future, open it up. So the one hot encoding is like a book. If I have just this book, for example, it's just a book. But when I open it up, it becomes a pages of a book. So the same thing the one hot encoding does. So if I have a gender, like just gender like this, the next thing when I open it up, I now try to put the male now, create a new column. The female, create a new column. Then wherever there is male, I put one. Wherever there is female, I put zero. Then I go to the female column. Wherever there is female, I put one. Wherever there is male, I put zero. So the advantage is I'm going to be able to know if male have influence over, for example, we want to look at politics. We want to see the number of men and women that voted by gender. I want to really understand the male and female that voted for the Democrats or the Republican Party. So I want to see how they were influencing the voting pattern or who won of the person that wins the election. So when I'm interested about that and I'm developing a predictive model, I'm likely going to be using a 100 encoding to open it up for me, and then I'll be able to now know which of them. But let's say I just want to know the influence of gender. I don't need to further break it down to that level. I would likely just keep them in one uh, column of gender, and then I run my analysis. So the only thing I need to do now is to use the ordinal sort of, not really just encoding approach, where I would just say if it's a male, put zero. If it's a female, put one. But they will be under the column of gender. Okay, I'm not going to create a new column. But when I'm trying to zoom in further to know what really this category does, I'll likely open it up like a book and create extra column. Now, the implication of this one hot encoding, or the limitation of it, is that it creates several variables. And then remember, I talked about the dimensionality problem, the cost of dimensionality earlier on. So you can imagine if I am trying to reduce the dimension, if I now open it up, I will create so many dimensions. But the good part is, if I want to really go into the nitty gritty of this thing, then the one hot encoding is right. So the good thing again is that we now have computational power like the GPUs. So the graphical processing interface or unit gives us that power that we need to be able to compute these variables even in their billions. Okay, so that is one of the things we are counting on sometimes, that we analyze these tons and millions of these features without getting scared. The only thing is, another thing is the processing time. It may take time, but when you have the large computational power, you are going to be able to do that within a short period of time. So that's one thing you're going to be encountering when you are looking at the 100. Then the future hashing scheme. So when we turn arbitrary futures into indices in a vector format. So another thing again, we turn these futures to vectors, to matrix, like I told you earlier on. Most times you cannot operate without turning the futures to a matrix. So it means that you could see now that algebra is quite important for us in data science, because it's mostly going to be some of this binary linear combination sort of thing, and also things like matrices that we're going to be looking that they are quite relevant. And then there is also the embedding. So the embedding, like I said, it's mostly when we want to pick words and then we want to assign some certain values for them. So we sort of That happens a lot when we're talking about natural language processing. That's where we do those things. Another very important thing, I made mention of them, although in data science, statistics is not usually that pronounced, but it is very, very important to us because the statistics gives us, or it gives us like an introduction of the variables we want to model. Now look at it this way: like when you go to a tribe meeting or something, as a new comer in that meeting, nobody knows you, nobody cares. So the MC or something of in that meeting or in that occasion will now come and say, we are privileged in our midst to have so and so person, and then everybody clap for that person. And then later on, maybe during refreshment, you begin to see people, they go to meet the person. Oh, I don't know you were the one. So that's what the statistics does to us. The statistics introduce the variables to us. It helps us to understand these variables before we start modeling them, before we start creating insights from them. And so what does the statistic does? It helps us to know the distribution of the data, to give us a proper description of the data in form of the descriptive statistics like the mean, the median, the mode, the standard deviation, the variance, and the quantiles, the percentiles. All these are very important to us. It helps us to understand this data. Is there some sort of outliers that are happening in the data? It helps us to also, try to understand that. Another thing is also it helps us to be able to get to define our hypothesis clearly, because statistical inference itself, it's all about understanding some sort of likelihoods of things that are happening. So you now begin to see us coming up with some good hypotheses that are testable, and they are testable because we now begin to say, okay, I can pick this variable and associate it with this variable and understand the kind of relationship that exists between that variable. So when we have the population, the next thing statistics help us is to, through probability, to be able to come up with proper understanding of the distribution of the data. Another thing, again, the inferential statistic does for us about is to understand the kind of relationship that exists between the population and the sample. For example, like I used to say, whenever I remember when I was in East Africa, when I was in Kenya, if I'm in a matatu, the thing that those guys tell me, somebody just passed me, the next thing he'll say, Oga. And then I said, how do you know I'm a Nigerian? Say, oh, I know you're a Nigerian because we watch Nigerian films. And there is a kind of head shape that Nigerians have. There is a kind of nose Nigerians have. There is a kind of face. They begin to give me 1001 reasons how they are able to identify Nigerians. Now, why? Nigeria is the population. I was just a sample, but they were able to understand me because they had some sort of relationship through Nigerian movies that they watch. They are able to know or recognize a Nigeria. And then that helps them to give them a probability distribution, because the probability is the confidence at which you'll be able to make that decision. So you could see how confident these people are to arrive on a scale that from 1 to 10, this person is in Nigeria. Oh my goodness. So this is what happens. The probability, the statistics helps you to be confident of the data you're about to model. Okay, so that's what the statistical analysis does for you. So another thing is sampling from distribution. Like I told you guys last time, it's very difficult for you to sample all the population. One, because you do not have the resources to do that. And secondly, it's the population itself is very heterogeneous. It's very diverse. So that makes you to practically impossible for you to investigate everything there. Outside that, again, the time constraint. You may not have the whole time, for example, to go to the whole 36 states of Nigeria to observe everything you wanted to observe about, let's say, APC or something. Although APC is not a good example, but let's say APC. So it's, so the population makes it difficult for you to, so, but because of that, you need to narrow down. You need to now say, okay, what samples am I interested in? Let's say you are trying to look at cassava production in Benue State. It's very impossible for you to go to every farm in Benue to, to know how, or the right cassava and the soil type and everything. So what you need to do is to be focused, specific. Say, okay, probably I'm going to look at cassava production in Benue State with case study of Okwaku local government, or Otukpo local government, or Fandikia local government, or Agatsu local government, or any of those. You specify. Or you could even decide to say, okay, I want to pick 3 local government. I want to pick one from the Igide side. I want to pick another one from the Idoma side. I want to pick another one from Tiv side. And then with these 3 local government that represent the 3 major tribes in Benue, you can now come to a conclusion and say, okay, so with this now, if I model this, it's likely going to represent everything across the 23 local government in Benue State. I think it's 23 if I'm not mistaken, right? John, is it 23 local government we have in Benue? Okay, I don't know if you guys are there, or I'm still talking to myself.
Yes, yes.
No, no,
We are here.
Yeah, we are here.
we are with you, sir.
Okay, good. I want you guys to validate. We have 23 local government in Benue State, right? I don't want to
Yes,
speak.
sir.
Okay,
Yes,
I
yes,
want to
sir.
be
23.
sure. I want to be sure of what I say. Okay, so
Just my own
that
place is not so how to mute myself.
okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what sampling from the distribution means. So we sample from the distribution. Now there are several ways we could sample from the distribution. One of it is by what we call the probability density function. Now, another thing again, when we talk about probability density function, probability density function is nothing but trying to look at, like I said, the shape of the distribution. So the shape of the distribution gives rise to what we call the random variables. So the random variables is more just the representation of the sample. I think in the first or second case of this class, I told you guys about how these things map out. So the random variable is just mapping out these samples from the population set to the sample set. And then we talk about, I think for those of you that are in the mathematical areas, you will do this course that we call measure, probability measure and all that. I think in 400 level, where you'll be taught so much about some of these things and how it works, where you talk about the random, the subspace, the vector space and all that. So the random variable is just a representation that takes in variable from the population and maps it. So if it's taking this variable from the population and it's mapping it to the sample space, you could see that you certainly need some level of confidence. So that level of confidence is what we now say we that gave birth to probability that you see. So when they say probability density function, it's just talking about these things, that mapping that is happening. Okay. So, but the thing is this, then the population will inform the nature of the sample size. So that's where we now begin to look out for different ways to carry out the the distribution. So you will discover that in that probability density function, we also have the probability discrete function. So the discrete function focus on discrete variables such as the binomial distribution. In fact, the Bernoulli is the simplest in that particular category. The Bernoulli is just talking about zeros and one. But the thing is this, because of the level at which we want to, these things happen not in an infinite manner. but in an N population, that gave birth to what we called the binomial distribution. However, another thing happens. It is not always going to be wuru, because there are times you sampled from that thing and the chances that you made the right choice is not there. So because of that, that gave birth to what we call the probability of a failure. So you now see the probability of the success, we say is P, and then we say the probability of the failure is 1 minus P, which we say
Minus
is
the P,
P
yes.
Q. Okay? So
Yes, sir.
that is what happens when we talk about the binomial. Then when there are processes that are not just occurring randomly, but they are evolving because of the process of time. So because of the time factor that is attached to those variables, it gave birth to a process called the Poisson distribution. So the Poisson distribution want to take into account the time. But however, this time is occurring such a way that is not in your control. So it means it is evolving in an exponential manner. So it is that exponential nature of the evolution of this event that now make us to say the Poisson distribution is happening in the process of time. That's why when we are looking at queuing theory, you always see we talk about the Poisson distribution, the Poisson distribution. Now, why is it important? How long I spend in a queue is important to me, because if I come and stay in the queue for a whole day, I am going to be. Now you see why Nigerians get frustrated whenever they are in a queue for a long time. You see people rat that, and then people trying to jump queue and all that in a bank, especially this season of Christmas. You see a lot of queuing in the banking system. So that queuing there is very important, because we now say, okay, how do we optimize this system to make the queuing, the waiting time to become small? Because the queuing can be as a result of a problem coming from the server, which are the accountants and all that in the bank. And if it's a health sector, let's say the doctor that is attending to the patient. So we now begin to say, okay, now maybe we could put a bound on the time and say you attend to every patient, irrespective of the diagnosis of those patients, in 10 minutes. Or you say, if you are a cashier in the bank, you attend to the customer, let's say in 20 minutes. So, but we can only know this when we now take this data set from the process, and then we make some analysis, and then we say, okay, we have discovered that the average waiting time in this particular season of the year is 1 hour. This is, then we now say, how do we regulate this system? Okay, so that evolution that happens, then there are situations where we begin to see that it is not just looking like a Poisson distribution. However, it is looking like a different thing. So we could see so many distribution happening. So one of the thing that we looked out for, and that we compute in this case, is looking out for potential associations. We try to look out for what is happening between these groups. So
I
we
know
are
where
we
I
are
will.
so we are
I think the
interested.
commenter the where I again.
So we are interested in so much. Sorry, you guys can mute in case, because of the noise. We can mute in case. Okay. Okay, good. So we are interested in looking out for potential differences that are occurring between these samples that were around. So we have the between or the between group differences and the across differences. So when you are looking at things like ANOVA, analysis of variance, these are some of the things you are taking note of. You want to know what is happening between and what is happening across them. And I wouldn't want, like I said from the beginning of this course, I will not go so much on these things because I wouldn't want to bore you with the mathematics. It's more of a practical, but I want you to know these basics so you don't just apply things wrongly. So another time, sometimes is we artificially try to simulate these processes. So things like Monte Carlo sampling approach comes into play. And then also things like resampling techniques comes into play as well. So we try uh, to randomly, artificially create synthetic samples, especially when it is a process. Why is the simulation important? It's important because, like I said, sometimes we don't have the resources. The resources is finite. Okay, the resources is finite and choices are limited. You could imagine Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. So before he start talking of going to Mars, he has to make sure they create synthetic process. They simulate it and even simulate how the rocket is going to take off and how it's going to land. So by the time he finished all the simulation, then they understand from the calculations that this is what they need. This one, then they begin to go about the project. And you could see, even despite the simulation, they still run into errors. Like several times, you see their rockets coming back and crashing. I think recently they successfully landed it back in the air. Not that it went out to Mars, but it was able to take off and also landed successfully. So that means the next time they will be now thinking, how long will it take them to go to Mars? How many fuel will the rocket need? How the detachment processes are going to happen? So the simulation environment help us to be able to do that before we take the real data. So there are times, especially in physics, chemistry, and all these fields, they work with simulations a lot because that helps you to create with syntactic data set and all that. And then even in data science, sometimes we try to do that, especially in a situation where we lack information, like when we have imbalanced data set, we try to use that to balance up. We oversample or we undersample a particular data. And what that does is simply creating synthetic data, and then we test it to see how the performance does. Although I'm not really a fan of that sort of oversampling, because I strongly believe that I have to punish the algorithm to learn the hard way. Because when it learns the hard way, when I deploy it to the field, it will not be able to be making costly errors. So I try to make sure that if we can find a way to make the algorithm to understand the process without having to create synthetic processes that favors it, it will do much well whenever we deploy it. So having said some of those things about the distribution and many of those things I've said, I wouldn't want to bore you much again about those things. So today I wanted to briefly introduce you into understanding your data with Python. And then last week I gave you a video. I sent a video last week on Python. Were you guys able to watch the video? Did you guys have any by chance able to have a glance of the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can any of you just tell us a bit about the video? What was it saying? Maybe just in a few minutes. Any of you willing? Feel free. It's an interactive section, so you don't have to be bright. In explaining it to us. What do you just understand about the video? What does it show you and all that? Just be brief.
Okay, from my understanding,
Mm.
the woman was actually trying to explain how to impute those variables, how to code like in a simpler manner. and I tried using my phone to input some of those stuff she sent, and the thing came out without errors.
Oh, good, 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 great, great, great. And that's a good one from your end. The other people, were you guys able to go through it? John, were you a chance to look at the video?
Myself, I will not lie. I've not been able to go through the video because of my phone.
Okay,
I said earlier, I just got this one yesterday. The older phone was giving me problem, so
okay,
I was not
okay,
able to do anything virtually possible yet.
okay.
But I'll be more stable now going forward.
Good. Okay. How about Olga?
Honestly, for me, I was not able to go through the video, but today I'll find time to go through the video. Boss willing.
Okay. And
Thank you.
Pastor Paul, were you able to do that?
Honestly, I've not been able to go through that into it.
Okay. 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 So the thing is this, you know, one thing I that made me to share some of those videos for you is to sort of introduce you to have some ideas about how the class should look like, and having, because I strongly believe that um, if you want to learn data science, like I said to you guys, the best way to learn data science is to do data science. So some of these videos, you have to, when you watch them, it gives you insight, and then you also begin to see how to, like Ernest said, she's trying to practice some of those codes to see how they work, because if you don't put them into practice, you will not be able to understand it better. So you could imagine programming is just like how a child is learning a new language. I said that because I remember when I was in Italy, the first thing I have to tell myself, because I have to attend Italian classes. So, and then the thing is, it was strange because all my life it's English as I was taught. Although I did a bit of French when I was in Kenya, but of course that was just to pass exam. And we're even using it for fun. And we see the French guys, we say mon ami and all that, crack lots of. So, but then now I needed to learn, because now I found myself in a country where they do not speak English. So it means when I'm out of the classroom and I go maybe to a market, the people do not hear me because it is their country. And I think that's one of the things you have to realize, for some of you that I trust God you'll be getting to Europe. It's not all the European countries that speak English. It's very few of them. Most of them have their language. If you're in Germany, you're likely going to learn how to speak German. If you're in Italy, you have to learn how to speak Italian. If you are in Belgium, I think you also have to then speak, I guess, Portuguese or French, or one of these. So there is few countries like the US, Netherlands, and I think few countries that speak. Like if you're in Israel now, you also have to learn the Hebrew language or something. So you see that you have to learn them. Why? Because you do not have a choice. It's either you swim or sink. And then the language gives you that sort of acceptance. I remember I went to the bank when I was in Italy, because then you need to open an account and all that. So when I got there, I greeted the woman, because in Italian, good morning is buongiorno. So I said buongiorno, and she said, oh, buongiorno. And then I told her, I said, uh, uh, parle inglés. That means my English is very is very small. I do not hear English, something like that. And then she now told me and said, I don't speak English. I said, but you just spoke in English. Do you understand? She speaks English, but she told me she do not speak in English, and she spoke in English. And I said, oh, but you just spoke in English. So But then I realized that they are more comfortable whenever you speak their language. It also shows that you accepted them. It's some sort of acceptance. So then I have to start making deliberate thing to listen to Italian videos. I just put the videos sometimes when I'm coding in the background. It's just playing, and I'll be getting to a word, and I have to start from one letter word. I have to start from, bambini, for example, is small baby. Uh, Jono is days. Stuffs like that. I just have to start learning them. Gradually, you know, uh, uh, I think water is aqua. Top like so, now that I'm trying to remember some of these things. So if I have to keep learning to be able to, interact. And I remember then when I go to the Mensa to eat, and when I speak the language to the women that are serving food, they feel so happy. And if you know me, I like my stomach very well. So that was giving me, it was making them to put more food for me. Okay, so because they were happy that, this Nigerian guy that came here and could not speak anything, that way he could speak one or two things in our language. So that language gives you, it helps you to be able to adapt. So the same thing with programming. You have to understand now you are going to be interacting with the computer. So you are going to tell the computer to solve problems for you. The computers cannot solve problems for you if it doesn't understand the language of the instructions you want him to solve the problem for you. And the good thing is this, you will not be just learning it in the hard way, because now we have AI assistant tools like ChatGPTs and the rest. We'll be using them in the course of this class to help you guys. But I want you guys to be deliberate about learning the basics, because I wouldn't want you to leave everything entirety to the machines to do them for you. It's not right. Okay, you have to be involved in order for you to shape the kind of science you want to practice. So so these are some of the things that you will be, and really want you to take note of that, because it's quite important, you know. So be deliberate. I know, like I said, it's one of the thing. My vision for you guys is to shape you guys to become great people, to become great minds. So what did I say? By making you great minds, I want you to have this understanding that whenever you see a problem, the next thing you think about is, how do I automate this problem? How do I, solve it in a very fast way using programming? Okay, so that you can achieve it if you begin to really think from the traditional state of the art way of thinking. And my dream for you guys in the course of this journey is to see you going places, solving complex systems and problems, and you can be able to do those things even if you are not in that sort of position. You can still be able to do them. None of us are born to that knew these things, but we just learned it somehow along the way. So you can learn it. So by watching so many videos and all that, you will be able to learn some of these things. Okay, so it's good you try to take some of the things I sent serious. So let me see if we could just quickly talk about Python a bit. Then we'll digress and talk about some of the links that I was sending on scholarship and all that, to see if we could use the remaining time. So maybe in the next 20 minutes or 15 minutes, I'll just talk briefly about Python. So okay, let me see. I think before I go into the slide, I have so many materials. No, I think this is different. I think I'm sorry I didn't pull out the area that I wanted to just talk about. It's a bit of
Okay.
so briefly let me just talk about just a bit of things about Python. So Python is a very popular programming language. Um, let me see if we can quickly look at where Python is today. Uh, I want to see oh good. I didn't have that much. So Python is consistently ranked among the top programming languages in various areas. So in terms of popularity of programming language, Python is typically ranked as the most popular programming language. Then there is this Toby index that ranks Python among the top 3 programming languages. So you could see how popular Python is. It's just like the English is currently. English language is one of the popular language because it's spoken, across the world. So that's how also Python is. So like if you come to Africa now, you say the most popular languages you're likely going to see English and French, or French and English, anyhow how you want it. But these are like then maybe thirdly if you talk of Arabic, they are much more like the popular language. So that's how Python is in the programming language. It is very, very popular. So, but not just about the popularity of Python, we we can install this Python, on our computer, whether you are using Windows or you're using MacBook, or you're using Linux. So it depends on the system that you are using. But all of them, you could install Python programming. Then the Python, you could interact directly with the Python using a shell or a notebook. You can interact with it using a shell or a notebook. So as we continue to dive into the practical part of this class, we will see how we could do the installation. I believe next week I'm going to show you guys how we could install both the Python on our system and also Anaconda, Jupyter Notebook, and all that. And then that next week will be more of a practical class. So, but today I want you to know that Python is a very popular programming language. It is ranks among the 3 programming languages, alongside with R. R is also a very popular programming language. So we will see how we could be going hand in hand with Python and R. Okay, so in order for you to be able to practice data science, you must be able to demonstrate that. And the language that you will use to communicate to the Python in this case is Python. And you could do that via a platform. You remember when the colonial masters comes to Nigeria, for example, they do not understand the language of the local people. So for them to communicate with the local people, they needed a translator, somebody that the white man talks to him, and then he talk back to the local people, and vice versa. So the same way you communicate to the computer, using this Python on a platform of the IPython or shell. So the IPython is also called the shell. And then there is what we also call the Jupyter notebook. And then also there is what we call the one that was done with by Google, called the Colab, Google Colab. So this Google Colab is also the same way like the way the what do we call it, Jupyter notebook is the same way like the Jupyter notebook. For example, I do use the Google Colab because it also provides me with the platform to use it. If you have a Google account, you always be able to access the Google Colab. It's not a big deal. For example, this is a code I ran in my Google Colab. I was trying to make a plot called forest plot, and then I ran this code to produce this plot for me on Google Colab. So the Google Colab, the Jupyter notebook, the Python, the IPython shell, there are two places that we could be able to run uh, Python programming languages. So whenever we have to interact with our data, we use this Python, and then we load the data and then we communicate with the data. So I wouldn't be able to go very deep today, but by next week when we start the practical class, I'll talk more about it. So we said Python programming to at least the level of to define in SQA. Now this particular slide actually assumed you have already been introduced to the Python programming and also the Jupyter notebook, but which we will be doing that next week. I would show you guys how we could be able to install the Python program in our laptops, and then we will be able to see how we could install the Anaconda and also the Jupyter notebook to see how we could get that done. And also the Python comes in different version. Like I said, if your computer is in Windows, you can be able to use it. So briefly, if you want to understand your data set in Python, you need to load your data, and then you need to sometimes create some sort of data frames, and sometimes you create dictionaries and etc. But I don't think this is actually the right topic for you guys, because I think, sorry, let me get another material for you guys. That I shouldn't jump to these things. It's not right. I should take you guys through baby steps. Just- um, these are complex materials. Let's see. Very good materials that should be exercises. Um, um, I'll pull it out. I'll pull it out next week. I promise you guys, I'll pull it out. I wanted to use the same materials that I used when I was doing my coursework. I can't remember where I save it in these folders, but I'll pull it out for you guys. I want to start by introducing you guys to the nitty gritty part of it. I don't want to jump this big step. I think if I go directly here, I am jumping so many things. And I don't think it's good for you guys. I want you guys to follow it gradually to the level of understanding. So we will dive deeper into the practical side of the installation and everything next week. I think that will make more sense. So, what I would expect from you guys next week is we will download Python, or probably I could give you guys the link on how to download them, and then we will do the installation next week. And by the time we do
Okay,
all
sir.
the installations, and then we will start with getting our hands dirty. So then we could start about, we could know what is an integer, what is uh, you need to know what is a loop. How do you write a loop? How do you write this thing? So if I jumped into what I wanted to show you guys now, and I think it's quite complex. I'm not doing you guys a favor. I shouldn't jump those things so you guys could be able to learn. I think this the practical side is very, very important. So I shouldn't rush you guys through that one yet. But rest assured, you will start doing projects soon. Don't worry. I know you guys are hungry to get to do these complex things, but trust me, if you jump some of these little things, you may not really be able to. When you run into some errors, you need to know what are those errors, what are the type errors, what are so also I think you should try to watch that video, because I could see in that video the lady talk about some of these errors. She talk about some of these things. She talk about when you have an integer. I actually watched that video while I was on my way to work in the bus. I remembered I opened the video and I watched it, and I do enjoy what she was saying. She talked about Alan Turing, she talked about the early calculators, she talked about some of these things. So I did watch the video. I did watch it. So please do watch it. It's quite going to help you guys in
Yeah,
comprehending
like
the next
um,
class.
it's okay. Like myself, I think I'll talk to some of them that can still access that video. I lost so many data from my former phone when the
Okay.
phone started misbehaving. So I lost the video. I lost everything. Like this phone now is like new. Everything is new. So, but
Okay.
I'll
Probably
talk to
and
Justina.
yeah, and you can help us to repost the video again and see probably. Okay, so you can
And even
repost it
those
in the
links,
group again.
you can have access to those links. You can please share to the
Okay,
platform again.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
for the benefit of those that are still joining too.
okay, great.
okay, fine.
So
Yeah.
okay, nice. So I think last time there are some questions that came from the group. I think one of it came from Pastor Paul, where he talked about. I don't know, Pastor. Are you more comfortable with Pastor or Apostle? Which one? I don't know which one to call. Okay, I think some people had issues opening the Microsoft team. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I think Pastor Paul talk about he asked the question on if we can talk brief about scholarship applications and opportunities. Okay, so the thing is, if I understand your question very well, you guys needed me to shed more light on that. I don't know how many of you agree to that, because we have a democracy here. It's not the kind of democracy in Nigeria, the ones that the executive will just bypass everyone and enact laws. Here we should be veto based on everyone's choice. So do you guys agree I should talk about it for the remaining time we have?
Okay, it's
Yes,
cool.
Yes,
For
sir.
me.
for me, I agreed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So
That is
fine. Okay, so I'm going to start by telling you guys briefly about my own self. And I think I said a lot some of these stories to John, and John is not actually a new person to some of those things. John, he knows me very well because he used to be with, he knows a lot, as I would say, he knows a lot about me. It's right from the hostel in University of Jos when I met him. I was in 200 level, then he was in 100. All right, John. I met you
Exactly.
while I was in 200, then you were in
You were
100.
already in 200 level when we came to 100 level. Yes.
Okay, good. So,
Yes.
um, John did knows a lot on me, and he has been someone I would say we have known way back to quite a long time. Even when I eventually left the hostel in 300 level, he do come around during before the semester starts, and then I give him some of my he used my materials directly. The materials I used, I give it to him, and then I tell him about how he could navigate through the semester and all that. And then later on, I eventually graduated, and then I left, but we still keep in touch. We always talk. And I remember uh, when I came to Nigeria the last time, and John's call came in, and I was laughing. I was like, John, how did you know I'm going to be in Nigeria? And he was like, he didn't know, but he just said you should call. So that was how I told John I was in Nigeria. I don't think you stayed back for 2 days before you started coming to see me.
I
So
came that I
John,
came that very evening.
yeah,
That
that
very
very
evening I came.
day. Yeah, it's a we know way back. So I think one of the thing about for me how I got exposed to scholarships, so it started in my 200 level. So I was having a discussion with this guy in my class, but he was in mathematics while I was in statistics. He's called Yakubu Yaks. We do call him Yaks. So he was a recipient of two scholarships, one from Total, and then the other one was from NNPC or one of it. I can't remember which one of gave him. He was having two scholarships, and then as of that time, he was having probably close to 400 or 500,000. So one day we were talking, and that thing came up, and I told him, I said, how do you go about it? And he told me, he said, look, you can apply it and you can get it, and it could help you. By the time you get some of these things, it take away a lot of burdens from you. You don't have to worry much about how you're going to pay your school fees. All what you need to do is to make sure you maintain a certain CGPA. And he was like, with your CGPA, if you continue to maintain that, you likely definitely going to get it. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So since then, after what he told me, I now started making application. But at undergraduate level in Nigeria, sometimes you don't really have access to some of these things that much. And then, yeah, I think by the end of my 100 level, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think 100 or 200 level, yeah, I think the end of 200 level, I went for MTN scholarship exam in ABU Zaria. I was selected for the exam, and along with other people, I think we were like 7 or 9 of us that went from University of Jos. So we went there. We sat for the MTN exam. I didn't get it, and I was being discouraged. I just say, well, probably it's not my own, and then I continue again. Then in 200 level, I went for I think federal government scholarship for still undergraduate, and I think I didn't get it also. But this lady was selected then in my set, Chineye, and Chineye was she had like the strongest CGPA then in the whole of the department, probably even the faculty. So I wasn't surprised. But I think then she was on either 4.8 or 4.9 thereabout. She was quite on a very strong first class. So I was like, okay, it's fine. So 300 level, I still put forth for federal government scholarship. Then I knew I'm going to get it because I think that period I was like the only person that was really among those first class guys that didn't have any scholarship. I don't think I was banking on that as well, but I was kind of confident when I saw the exams. It wasn't really that complex. I answered it very well. I prepared for it. So I just know. Because when I was in University of Jos, there was this way of I just used to know when I'm going to have an A, I just know this is going to be an A. If I'm going to have a B, so I kind of mark my script myself in my head. So I used to just have this insight of. So you see, before my exams, I'm going to write out the grades I'm going to have. And then when I finish that exam, I come and take it and say, okay, now this is A. I say, okay. So maybe when the exam comes, there's only one or two of them that will fall out of it, but most likely all of them will happen. And then the reason then I write out my grade, it helps me to work towards it. And then I was not, you could imagine I was not a sort of serious person that you say, oh, I was a serious Christian. I was praying. It's not like I didn't believe in God. I did believe in God, but I was more focused on my academics. It was what was bothering me. So, but it was actually I discovered that there was a verse, there was a scripture in the Bible that say, write the vision clearly, so that he that runneth will read it. And I was like, oh, so I was doing these things. I didn't even know it was documented in the Bible. You know, but that was what I used to do. I write out my grade from the beginning of the semester. I said, this is what I want to get, this is what I want to get, this is what I want to get. In fact, me graduating in first class started even down to my undergraduate days, 100 level, where the department give us new books for new students. And then when they give me that book, at the back of the book, there was a computation that was done for someone that had 4.4 CGPA. And then I told my roommates that time, Lambo, I said, I will get this CGPA. And he said, you cannot do this. I said, I will. I kept that book with me, I think, till even when I graduated, I kept it because then that gave me that insight, like I could do this. And I started working towards it. So there's this power of that. So when the scholarship came out for the federal government, I got the scholarship, and then it was paid for me, I think, in my 400 level. But that gave me, it really helped me. That scholarship helped me to solve so many problems. I was able to buy my laptop. I was able to get other things. I was able to, I think, pay my rent. So many things were taken out of the way. I went home for the Christmas of 2014. So on reaching home for the Christmas, I remember I was at our Opoga meeting, and then they talk about some sort of a scholarship they want to organize. So I happened to be at home that period, and the event was happening in Ugopoga. So I decided to go there with one of my cousin's brother. And so when I got there, they told me that okay, they have applied for this but I could do that. So I kind of did put up some sort of a shambolic application there and there. I just wrote it out and attached my transcript, and then I submit. And when they started the event, they said they are going to support the awardees with I think 20,000, and of course the 20,000 kind of a big money there because Nigerian currency didn't really lose value like they have now. So it was quite a good catch for someone that came for a Christmas holiday. So I noticed during the meeting, they have to call another emergency meeting, and they did the meeting and all that. So later on, they came and called the people they want to award, and they were like, there was this application that came up, and they could not just refuse it. And the guy was like, I called this one the miracle man. And then they called my name, and then I stepped out, and they awarded it to me as well, and then they transferred the money to my account, and I was like, wow, this is not a bad one. I actually came home for Christmas, and now I got a scholarship, so that was great. So looking at that, I was quite motivated. So when I went, so before my NYC, I had a privilege to meet this professor in my church. Then I was attending Redeemed Christian Church. So there was a professor that was there, one Professor Kafo. So he was like, you are having a first class, and I think you stand a good chance of getting scholarship that could fund your masters and all that. And I was like, well, I don't know. And he was like, I should look out for things like Commonwealth scholarships and all that. So he gave me sort of like a tip. So I came back, and that was the period where people could easily, you could get 1.52 gig, even 5 gig at like 500 naira thereabout. So I happened to get those things, and that was how I started searching out for scholarship. So I now discovered for international scholarship, like Commonwealth, I needed to get the admission, and then when I get the admission, I need to now begin to look out for the scholarship before I could be able to get those ones. So another thing I now discovered is that I will need to have persons that will write reference letter for me, such as professors and all that. They will write reference letter to say they know me, they know my character and all that, and talk about my performance and all that. And then outside the references, I will also need to submit the transcript. So and then I was like, okay, so if I have to submit a transcript, I need to get the transcript. But the problem is Nigerian university, they don't give you the transcript. They prefer you come and tell them where you want to send the transcript, you pay them, and then they forward the transcript. But the problem is we all know how Nigeria works. You don't have the money to keep coming back each year to collect your scholarship. So you just have to find a way to have a copy of the scholarship. So luckily for me, the guy that was there, I think one Quincy, I learned now he's either a House of Rep or something in party state. I don't know, but he's now into politics. So I happened to know him because I was the class rep during those days. I used to take to sort out the I can't remember how we call those course form or something. Yeah, it's course form. I take the course form of everyone, studied out at the end of the semester or something. So I happened to get across to him. Then I talked to him, and I remember that money was because during my 400 level, I started.
Okay.
Sorry, John, you want to say something?
Okay, no. I
Okay.
think you are trying to say tutorial, but earlier so I wanted to say tutorial.
Okay. So my 400 level, then I was privileged to start doing analysis for people. I learned SPSS. Proud to that period, I took my practical area serious along with some of my friends. One of my other friend that is late now, Usman, Donny, and Oyowe, and all the guys. I try to learn.
Wait, but
Uh,
Usman is late.
Yeah, Usman died right from before shortly after our defense. That was when Usman died. You don't
I
know?
didn't know. No, you know that
Usman,
fair that fair guy now, right?
that Fulani guy that comes to
That
my
slim,
place
yeah,
most
first
of the
slim
time.
guy.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
comes to yeah, it's like that. So
Oh,
so we learned some of those things. So I started doing analysis for people, and then people started bringing analysis to me. And sometimes then I remember I have to teach John SPSS that period when I have so much to code. I call him around, he helped me out some of the coding. In fact, there was a time I had to use John's laptop for quite a long time because my laptop was stolen in that period prior to our convocation. And I had so many people's project that I was doing. Luckily for me, I was able to save some of the projects on my drive. So that was how I was able to finish up with those things. So I was able to get some good money that helped. I was able to collect my transcript. Then I think I spent closely 15,000 there about, or maybe like 16, 17. I can't remember. But within that range, I collected the transcript. So with that transcript, I was able to now start putting up applications, and then I managed to convince some professors that now wrote references for me. But again, the thing is, I now discovered that I have to make lots of applications, not just one application. I have to submit and submit and submit and submit and submit. Meaning, I cannot just submit one application and go and sit. No, I came to realize you are competing with so many people and at global level. Some of these guys are coming in with so many expertise, especially guys from Asia like India, China. They are quite good. So you're quite of disadvantage when you're coming from Africa. So you can't just limit yourself to only a few applications. You have to submit so many applications. So then I have to subscribe to so many platforms where I get updates for scholarship. So I was beginning to do that till when I went for my NYC. I met some other guys as well that came back from schools from different parts of the world, from Turkey, Russia. So with some of these guys, we talk about some of these scholarships. So we started aiming and looking out for masters. So even when I was doing my NYC, I was already submitting applications to these platforms, to different things. So, but I think someone now told me about AIMS. That AIMS is a good place for someone from statistics, mathematics. I should submit application to AIMS. So I did submit application to AIMS. And then at the same time, one of the guys told me about this Pan-African scholarship. Oh, and then I also submitted an application to Pan-African scholarship. And then NIGDA and other Nigerian Commonwealth I was supposed to go for. I went for 2016 Commonwealth, but I was not picked because they said I was doing my NYC and corpus are not qualified. So that was how I couldn't attend the interview. So fast forward, I before my national after my national youth service, I was at the same time applying for other jobs like in KPNG, in Deloitte, so many other guys that I knew they needed the service of a statistician. So I was also going for interviews. So then I remember I was always traveling from Port Harcourt to Lagos, and then sometimes I go to attend interview and all that. So on one of the occasion I was in Lagos and I went for I think Deloitte exam, but I was not happy because the time was so short. I couldn't really do anything. I was so down and downcast there because I was like, oh, this didn't turn out the way I wanted. So the next day I needed to go back to Abuja because then I have to attend NITDA scholarship exam. So I was on my way to Abuja when I got the email for Pan African scholarship that I've been awarded scholarship and all that. So I was not like, okay, I can't go back to Lagos because I wasn't out of Lagos then because I was just almost around mile two thereabout when I saw that. I was like, probably I go back, but then I was like, no, I shouldn't go back again and start coming. So that was why I just left back to Abuja. So it comes to Abuja, I processed my passport, and then from there, I was thinking I'm going to be the one to fund the flight ticket, but luckily they said no, they are the ones covering for my flight ticket. So I waited for the flight. You can imagine I've never traveled out from Nigeria. It's quite strange for me. So luckily they sent the flight. I was to go to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Then from there I connect to Nairobi in Kenya. So that was how I went to Kenya, and it was quite a long story. Going to Kenya and all that. A lot happened also there, but towards while I was rounding up my masters, I started applying for scholarship in Kenya. I started looking out for other viable scholarship that I wanted. So I was able to get a PhD in statistics admission in University of Glasgow, but then I couldn't secure the funding for that because I wanted to secure a funding because without the funding it wouldn't have been possible. So at the same time, I came across this big data machine learning. I applied it in my project where I worked on food security. So that gave me a whole idea that, oh, this machine learning data science is quite a good area. So that was how I picked interest in this area. I started looking at it. I started researching in this area. And then, yeah, so I now started submitting. So when I came back to Nigeria, I was applying for jobs and scholarship. So when I eventually started working, I didn't work more than 2 weeks when my scholarship for PhD came. So, like, back to the question. So you could see I gave you a preview of my journey. You could see I had I have like 3 or 4 scholarships. So I think I could be in a good position to speak about some of these things. Even though I wouldn't say I have lots of experience, but I think I do have experience. So what makes you stand out is first you need to have your transcript. You need to get your transcript. Secondly, you need to get references. But now the problem comes that your professors, they don't have time to keep writing these reference letters for you. Because even if I'm the one, I'll get pissed off. I don't have the luxury of time to be writing it every time for someone. And you could imagine some of us, we submitted maybe close to 20 or even more than 20 applications. So how long will the professor come to be writing these things for you? They may not want to do that. So sometimes with their permission, or even, yeah, they may not want to permit you, although, but you can create some sort of uh, but sometimes it's not the right thing. But you can save the files. You can ask them to give you the reference in Word document. Then when you have them in Word document, you can continue to modify them from your end. So it means when you have a new application, you could just change the date, change the scholarship name, and then you convert it to PDF, you submit. You keep doing that on your own to submit. But if it has to do that, they have to fill, because there are scholarships that they have to fill. You have to put their email, and it has to be their official email, not a Gmail. Then you can use their email, and then you follow it up with a mail and tell them, oh, I submitted this application. Can you please spare a few of your time to fill in this application, the reference for me? So that way they could do that for you. So otherwise, you can also create some sort of like a Gmail account where you can create it in their name and you submit it. But you make sure that you don't use it for any other thing other than just submitting the reference on their behalf. So that way you could save them from doing that stress, having to submit it for you all the time in a loop, which they may not have that time to do that for you always. So that take care of the area of the reference. Then secondly, you must write a research statement. Now, the research statement, it makes someone to have like some sort of understanding of the kind of research you are interested in. So we have transcript, your certifications, reference letters, and then research statement. So the research statement is just to know the kind of research that you're interested in. And I can share samples of them for you with you guys in the group so you can see how to write a good research statement. So if you follow some of that example that I'll share with you, think about yourself. What sort of research you feel you can be able to do or you're interested in? And then you can write the research statement around it. It's not necessary that you're putting a sort of a topic. For example, I'm interested in maybe not me because I'm okay. Yeah, I could use myself. I'm interested in applying interpretable or explainable AI to long-term conditions and aging problems. So what I needed to do is to write a research statement generally on how I have my experience and skills around machine learning and how I'm passionate to deploy it in these areas. So when I submitted, um, someone would see it and say, oh, I can work with this student because he's interested in the kind of stuff I'm doing. Because the truth is, in Europe here, it's not like in Africa where uh, you are a professor in biology and then that's just biology. No, here you are a professor. You can be a professor in biology, but you have specific areas of biology you are interested in. And then there is high chances that the professor have fundings in these areas, and because they have funding in these areas, even if they are taking a student, they want the student to work on the problems they have. So the student don't have to go and start it from scratch, because when you come with your own problem from scratch, I'm telling you, you will not find people to supervise it. And this was what I didn't know before now. So then when I was applying for some of these scholarships, I was trying to propose a problem to solve. So it's wrong. Because they have what they are doing already. They write grants. Because here the way the system works, you have to write proposals to get funding, to get grants. That's the way you keep going. It's not like the Nigerian system where you are on the salary, whether you produce or not, you do things or not, you are getting paid at the end of the month. Here it doesn't work that way. You have to be the one to pay yourself, and you pay yourself by writing grants and proposals. You get funding. It is from that funding you will get paid. You can also employ other people. So that's how you get your own research group. So some of these things that I'm teaching you guys today, I want you guys to become good at it. If tomorrow you stand out and I have a grant and I put up an advertisement and you guys apply, you come and work in with me in the lab. So, but you see that I have a problem that I'm already solving. So when you come, I will put you up and say, this is what I want, this is what I want you to do. Then you do it. But that process you are doing it, you are also learning. You see how it goes. So that is why we are looking out for people that are interested in the kind of stuff we do. So when they come, they do that kind of stuff. So on your own part, you need to search the people that are interested in the kind of stuff you do. Why? Because academic is building on existing knowledge. So any side that you're interested in, there is high chances that there are people that are very knowledgeable and experienced in that area. So you will now come and bring in to fill in some gap in knowledge, because no matter how good that person may be, there is high chances that there are lots of existing gap in that area. So you bring in your new knowledge to help solve the problem that are in that area. So you should search some of these professors, some of these associates or doctors that are working in these areas that you are interested in. You can even drop some of them an email. You can, although some of them will block it because of email spam, but sometimes the email do go through. I remember writing to a couple of them and some of them actually replied me. So you could do the same, write email to them. I go through your university side. I saw the kind of research you are doing. This is who I am. I have my background in this, and I'm interested in the kind of research you are doing. Are there any? Are you currently having like a grant or something that has any opportunity for someone like me to work on? You sell yourself out. Like they said, if Muhammad does not go to the mountain will go to Muhammad. You can imagine,
Amen.
you can imagine as a young man that you are not married. You can. I remember when I was courting my wife, she said that she said the other day that now I know used to call her on phone. I said, but you are here with me, you are seeing me this kind. Because that time I can call her, I'll wait till midnight, then I'll put a call across to her, and then I'll give her all the scope in the world. So the same way, if you can do that because you want to get an attention of a woman, the same way you are selling yourself to someone to like your packaging, it's the same way you also package yourself to those people. So when you see an opportunity in Oxford University, you don't wait in order for them to, because these are some of the things the people will look out and say, this person actually is serious. You reach out to the people, you reach out to this person. Oh, I saw this opportunity was advertised and I'm quite interested in this thing. Can you? And then the person, so by the time they looked at those, they'll say, oh, this person is interested in this opportunity. I think this person will make a good candidate. So another thing again that makes you stand out is publications. It's very important because they need to assess to know your ability to be able to write to finish your research. We don't, like I said, the resources are finite. So because you are dealing with finite resources, you have to be able to constrain everything within a limited time. So you need somebody that can be able to achieve things, actionable insight. Like in the next 3 months, this is what this person should do, and this is what this person should do. So that by the time you are talking about a project that is spanning across 3 years, you are able to see viable thing that the person will do at the end of the 3 years. So you should have like outcomes, like produce things like research papers, and it's going to cost you. I remember uh, as an undergraduate student, I had some 1 or 2 papers, although it was covered. One was covered by Professor Kemby. Another one, I think I paid for it myself. And then there are other ones I put on other side, like Academia Edu, which was free. But it was something. At least I could refer someone to say, this is a link to where you can find what I produce. And then when I went for my master's, then I was already getting some money. So I spent a lot. I think I was able to produce like almost 8 research papers. Because then once I have a publication, I forward it, I pay for it. But then I didn't even know that there are actually fake journals, that they are not right. But I was able to get some papers out that, and pay for it. So you must produce things that you could show as evidence, because anybody that wants to employ you will see if you can be able to. In the academic cycle, it's like a vicious cycle where you have to go over it back to the loop. So what they use to measure you mostly is the papers that you produce. So you have to produce papers, you have to produce research papers. So producing research papers is quite important. So again, another thing is you begin to ask yourself, how do I go about it? It's solving problems. It's simple. If you identify problems, and I remember I wrote out a project for my niece on she was in English, and you could imagine I was in statistics, so we're in 2 different worlds. But I wrote a project for her, which I think is quite useful to these contemporary issues that we are facing in Nigeria. It's on a book called Zala, where if you read that book called Zala, it talks about a rich man in Senegal called Alaja. The rich man was very wealthy, that he took a second wife. And on the night of their consummation, he discovered he became impotent. So he now began to go from one merabu. Merabu is what we call native doctor. He was going from one merabu to the other to find cure to his Zala. Unfortunately, he spent all his money trying to find cure to his Zala. He couldn't get the cure. But finally, his driver, exhausted, he came and sat down close to a beggar. And the beggar said, what is the problem? He said, the problem is with my master. He's suffering from Zala. He couldn't get the cure. He said, I know what is wrong with your master. I'm the cause of your master Zala. He said, you are the cause? He said, yes, I am the cause. He said, the only way I could cure your master's Allah is that this is our terms and condition. Tell your masters to strip himself naked and will come and spat at his manhood, all of us. Then he will get cured to his Allah. The man has no option. The beggars came to his house. They messed everywhere. And then they have to spat at his manhood. Now, what happened? The man himself, he despised these beggars. He doesn't want to see them. He hates them so much. Why? He took their land, sold their land, sold what they have, and made them beggars. In return, they now take revenge on him. And the only solution for him is for them to humiliate him. Now, what do we call it in literature? The implication of that is that it is like a situation of we have in Nigeria, because the project was to relate the Zala with the current issues of Nigeria. So you see, in Nigeria, the ruling class despise the masses without knowing that the solution they are finding in Sokoto is in Sokoto. So the masses that they are despising, they are the same people that have the solution to the problem of Nigeria, but they don't know it. So for them to get the solution, they have to come back and humble themselves so the masses can walk on their back. That is how they could be able to find a solution to the problem of Nigeria. So why am I telling you this story? That kind of story, you could find a way to contextualize it into publication, publish it. When you publish it, it adds to your profiles. So by the time you now see opportunities, you begin to say, okay, now I have one or two publications that I can be able to sell, to add to my CV. So when anyone sees it, they could say, oh, he or she was able to do this publication. It means they produce something. I can employ this person. They can be able to embark on this PhD or master's journey. Although at master degree, most times nobody care much about your publication, but at PhD is a concern because it is what tells us about the tendency of you to be able to graduate at the stipulated time period. So that's one thing that makes you to stand out. Another thing that makes you to stand out is that when you get selected for the interview, you have to demonstrate some set of skills. You have to present yourself in a well-composed manner. You have to make sure that you pay attention to details. The other day we did an interview. I was in an interview panel where we interviewed for certain research roles. And one of the things I noticed with the first guy that we interviewed was when you asked him questions, he started reading it from book. It's like he wrote it somewhere and then he was reading it from there. And immediately I saw that, I told the other guys in the panel, I said, no, this guy is not, it's not right. We asked you questions about simple questions about yourself, and then the next thing you're reading it, and my name is, no, it's not what we want to see. You should practice to show some level of professionalism for that particular position. Another thing I saw, like the other candidate, I was so impressed with her. She was able to, explain herself and did that. And you could see the smile and everything in all of us. And after that, we ranked this candidate. And I think the first three candidates, we said, no, this three candidate stands out. We should be able to pick them. So that composure is very important. So what I usually I could tell you is that at least sometimes in an interview, you could prepare like one or two slides, where in the first slide, you could make it like a profile where you introduce yourself, tell us about you, tell us some things that you like, and then how you want to be able to bring some sort of innovation into. Okay, go and meet mama to wash it. So you'll be able to tell us some of these things. So it's very, very important. So pay attention to details. So during interviews, don't look confused. Compose yourself, and then nobody really. I think nobody really. There are things we care about so much in Africa. Really, it's not some of the things we are taking notes in Europe here. It's mostly your ability to really solve the problem. Like I told John, I think my PhD interview I did with them. I was wearing a singlet. And I just do it like, because then I just got my new job with ICANN as a manager, and I was like, now I'm starting Nigerian money. And then I was like, I didn't care if this interview go or not. But then I still do it, and I noticed the way the people were so friendly and impressed with me. And after the interview, I told my cousin brother, I said, those people are going to award me this scholarship. I was kind of certain, and by the time the grading came out, I think I had 80 something I think that I had. So you could imagine we're competing and then I never knew that Kuala Nomale was one of the best is the best universities in Italy. I didn't know. I just applied. But then it was later when I get to the system, I discovered, it was one of, I think currently in the world is around 145 university in the world. When Nigeria could not even make up to 1,000 on scale. So, but then I didn't know that it was. Okay, so, okay, come. A minute, we're rounding up now. So, in conclusion, these are some of the things that makes you a stand out. But there is no one fit size all approach to these things. But generally, these are some of it. And I could share one or two things to help you, like a research statement, maybe a research statement. You could see how to write a research statement, and then I could also give you some other links that maybe other experts have talked about that could also be of useful to you guys. And then you see how you could utilize some of these things. So if you are going for a master's scholarship, yeah, you can. I wouldn't say you should worry much about publication, but if you can, I think it's a plus for you. But it's not really mandatory. If you're going for a PhD scholarship, I think it's nice you have publication. It's a plus. It may not be compulsory or mandatory, but I think it's as a plus. Another thing again is the IELTS. The IELTS exam. For me, I didn't write because the scholarships I applied. It was not mandatory. I think it's optional. But if you are going to US or some countries, they talk about it. There are also countries that talk about GRE. Also, yeah, like US, mostly it's GRE that US talk about as well. But for some reason, I wasn't looking towards US, so I didn't require that. And in Italy, it wasn't a mandatory thing for me. So, but it's also another thing to take note of. The GRE, IELTS, yeah, it's also then another thing you subscribe to so many platforms where you could get this scholarship update because the more you get them, the better for you. So I think those are majorly what you need. So I could share some of these things with you to help guide you guys. So I think that's what I could say for now about the scholarship areas. So if you